members, we have now come to the important part of our on the agenda this afternoon on our order paper. That is the item budget for 2013. Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the motion for the approval of the estimates of the public sector and the budget for the financial year 2013. And in so doing, I wish to indicate that pursuant to Article 171, paragraph 2 of the Constitution, the Cabinet has recommended that the National Assembly proceed upon this motion. Mr. Speaker, like its predecessors, Budget 2013 provides us with the customary opportunity to renew medium-term objectives and goals, review accomplishments and outcomes over the past year, and outline plans and programs for the ensuing year. Coming as it does, however, as the second budget of this 10th Parliament of Guyana, Budget 2013 also provides us with an opportunity for reflection on and insight into the first full year of the prevailing parliamentary configuration. In the latter regard, Mr. Speaker, it might be recalled that I anticipated 1 year ago at the time of Budget 2012 that the current dispensation is fraught with formidable challenges and will test our respective resolve in this honourable House to make sound decisions that can withstand the scrutiny of time. On that occasion, I urged the prevailing of rational and meritocratic considerations, the identification of sensible and practical solutions, the avoidance of short-term choices that compromise long-term imperatives, the defense of that which is fair and just, and the most steadfast adherence to serving the national interest at all times. With the benefit of 1 year of experience since, those words seem even more prescient than I would have dared to think. The past 14 months have rendered a veritable plethora of examples of parliamentary action occasioned at the behest of the opposition's one-seat majority that consumed valuable legislative time and effort in futile, unproductive, and oftentimes counterproductive pursuits. Whether it be attempts to cut essential budgetary allocations or deny an elected member the right to speak, the moving of motions or passing of bills that defy reason or collide with our Constitution, or perhaps ultimately attempts to amend the very Constitution by the slendermost of simple majorities with no attempt at consultation, much less consensus. The courts of law and the courts of public opinion have both been condign in their judgment. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, the past few months did also provide some, albeit rare, examples of good sense prevailing over the din of political rhetoric, a glimpse of which emerged most recently towards the end of our last sitting. One can only hope that this will increasingly be the norm going forward, that we will witness more mature and responsible deliberations, and that more productive legislative output will emerge from the considerable time we spend together here. Every sitting of this House provides us with individual and collective opportunities to make a constructive contribution to the national good, and the people of Guyana expect that we do just that. With this constantly in mind, the People's Progressive Party civic government remains firmly focused on building a better Guyana for all Guyanese, and firmly committed to working as closely as possible with all like-minded stakeholders, both within and beyond the hallowed halls of this honourable House, in pursuit of that objective. We continue to value our ongoing stakeholder engagements, and we continue to receive from these engagements important inputs into our policy-making deliberations. Mr. Speaker, I urge once again that even after the most vigorous of debates, this House learns to speak more frequently with one voice, inspired only by that which is good for Guyana. Mr. Speaker, bolstered by our unswerving commitment to task, our government ensured the preservation of a policy environment that remained conducive to economic growth and social development throughout 2012. The result was a 7th consecutive year of real growth in our economy and associated strong macroeconomic performance, continued diversification of the productive sector, substantial progress on catalytic infrastructural projects, further strengthening of our social services, and visible improvements in our regulatory and institutional environment. Looking ahead to 2013 and beyond, our government's policy agenda continues to be aimed at building a Guyana that is truly a land of opportunity and prosperity for all. And we will remain undaunted and unfazed in our quest to realize this vision. To this end, we will continue to be guided by the 7 prerequisites outlined last year, namely a strong democracy, reliable and efficient institutions of state, long-term macroeconomic stability, economic diversification and growth, expanded physical infrastructure, high-quality social services, and environmental responsibility and sustainability. Budget 2013 reflects these priorities. Mr. Speaker, as we pursue this mission, we must be neither complacent nor mistaken about the global context in which we operate and the resultant vulnerability of our circumstances. Our economy continues to be exposed to an external environment that has been, to put it mildly, extremely unhelpful in recent years. And the global economy shows very few signs of near-term dramatic improvement. We are beset by the reality of climate change and increasingly volatile and extreme weather. The geography of our country and dispersion of our population combine to elevate the cost of accessing our natural resources and delivering services to our people. On their own, Mr. Speaker, these challenges immeasurably complicate the task of economic management in a country such as ours. Even as we devise a path to confront and overcome these complications of which we have limited control, it behoves us all to establish and defend the man-made and homegrown conditions that best conduce to sustained growth and development. We have an unshakable obligation to harness those factors that are more within our collective sphere of influence and mobilize and align them to best serve the interest of the long-term well-being and prosperity of our country. This is a responsibility that is shared and must be borne by every single one of us in this House and beyond if we are to realize our espoused aspirations. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the challenges of our time as we do, recommitting ourselves to ensure that they prove no impediments to progress, and calling on all others to join us in the steady march to further develop our country, Budget 2013 is presented under the theme, Overcoming Challenges Together, Accelerating Gains for Guyana. Mr. Speaker, I will now review global economic developments. As I've just indicated, prevailing global economic conditions continue to be extremely unhelpful to small economies such as ours. Growth in global output has been persistently lethargic, with implications for both investor appetite for risk and consumer demand for our goods and services. Commodity prices continue to be unpredictable, with implications for our exporters and importers and our producers and consumers alike. As a result, sustained recovery remains elusive in the Caribbean. The global economy grew by 3.2% in 2012, driven largely by the 5.1% achieved by emerging and developing economies, compared to the much slower 1.3% in the advanced economies. Amongst the former, China continued to lead with growth of 7.8%, while growth in India slowed somewhat to 4.5%. Amongst the latter, The Euro area and the United Kingdom both recorded negative growth of 0.4 and 0.2% respectively, offset by modest growth of 2.3% and 2% in the United States and Japan, respectively. Global growth is projected at 3.5% in 2013, underlying which is 5.5% projected growth in emerging and developing economies and 1.4% in advanced economies, with a growth profile across countries much the same as in last year. In particular, the Euro area is anticipated to post a second consecutive year of contraction, reflecting lingering uncertainty about the pace of recovery and the need for greater adjustment effort in the periphery. Much of global performance will also be influenced by developments in the United States, in particular in relation to the pace of fiscal consolidation, which, if excessive, could prove harmful to US and global growth prospects. Mr. Speaker, commodity prices remained broadly stable, but continue to mirror the uncertainty of the global outlook. Oil prices peaked in March at $118 per barrel, and then declined later to end 2012 at $101 per barrel, 3% lower than at the end of 2011. The world market price for gold remained strong and increased by 6.2% to $1,669 per ounce. Aluminum prices fluctuated somewhat during the year, but ended at $2,087 per ton, 3.1% higher than the end of 2011. Prices for food commodities generally ended 2012 higher than 1 year ago, but with divergent trends across individual commodities. For example, the world market price for rice and sugar declined by 2.6% and 18% respectively, while that for wheat increased by 29.3%. Mr. Speaker, on regional developments, growth in Latin America and the Caribbean amounted to 3% in 2012 and is projected at 3.6% in 2013, with Brazil projected to pick up from 1% last year to 3.5% this year. Closer home, growth in the Caribbean sub-region continued to be listless, with 1.1% in 2012 and a projection of 2% for 2013. Mr. Speaker, much like the global economy in recent years, economic performance in the sub-region has been dichotomous. Whereas the sub-region's commodity-based economies, particularly the oil and mineral exporters, have generally fared well in the prevailing global climate, the service-based economies, such as the tourism-dependent ones, have lagged behind. This distinction reiterates the need for accelerated diversification in and more effective integration across all of the economies of the Caribbean. Turning to domestic macroeconomic developments, Mr. Speaker, real gross domestic product. Mr. Speaker, the performance of the Guyanese economy continues to vindicate our efforts over the years to diversify our productive base and reduce our exposure to external and other shocks. It is to our collective credit, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and households alike, that our country's overall economic performance is no longer hostage to the fortunes of 2 or 3 dominant industries. Today, new and emerging sectors are creating jobs, generating incomes, and producing value-added output, while the traditional industries maintain a significant presence on our productive landscape. Together, Mr. Speaker, they make for a more resilient economy and more persistent growth into the long term. Against this background, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that real GDP grew by 4.8% in 2012. A seventh consecutive year of positive growth. It is significant to note that when the sugar sector is excluded, non-sugar GDP grew by 6%, reflecting the even more rapid expansion being achieved in the rest of the economy. Sectoral performance. Mr. Speaker, The sugar industry delivered total production of 218,070 tons in 2012, a contraction of 7.8%. Industrial relations disruptions and inclement weather patterns continued to plague the industry during the first half of the year. And even though a dry weather spell aided the industry during the second crop, the first crop contraction of 33.4% could not be compensated for by the second crop growth of 13.3%. In striking contrast, the rice industry continued to exceed expectations in 2012 and recorded another year of outstanding performance, with total production growing by 5% to 422,057 tons, the highest tonnage produced in any one year in the industry's entire history. The sustained strong performance of the industry reflects the benefits of investments made in supportive infrastructure, as well as efforts made to strengthen forward and backward industry linkages, from preparation through manufacturing to marketing. Continued favorable market prices and improved drainage and irrigation in the rice-growing areas also served to boost production capacity and augur well for the industry's future. In non-traditional agriculture, production of other crops grew by 5.3%, benefiting from improved weather conditions in the second half of the year, coupled with easier domestic and export market access. Livestock production increased by 14.4%, driven primarily by heightened demand, especially in mining communities. The fisheries industry grew by 15.5%, with an expanded trawling fleet in operation. The forestry industry recorded a 4.3% decline, with total production of 369,645 cubic meters. The Guyana Forestry Commission is working with operators to encourage optimal utilization of forests and to widen the range of species harvested as a means of expanding production levels. Mr. Speaker, the mining and quarrying industry returned 14.8% growth over 2011. Declared gold production of 438,645 ounces was the highest recorded in the entire history of the gold industry, excluding Omai production, and was 20.8% higher than in 2011. The bauxite industry recorded growth in value added of 12.5%, with production of 2,213,972 tons, the highest rate of increase achieved in the production of cement-grade bauxite. Production of diamond and stone recorded declines of 22.2% and 10.8% respectively, while sand production recorded a 76.5% increase, which, when taken together, resulted in the other mining subsector recording an overall decline of 14.6%. Manufacturing output grew by 2.4%, reflecting mixed performances, with some products recording increased output, such as beverages. Value-added output in the services sector increased significantly, with many industries achieving positive growth. Wholesale and retail trade grew by 6.7%, consistent with increased imports of consumption, intermediate and capital goods. Information and communication grew by 4.2%, reflecting growth in demand. Electricity and water output grew by 5.7%, transport and storage by 18.9%, finance and insurance by 13.8%, rental of dwellings by 4.5%, and other services by 4%. An 11% decline was recorded in the construction sector as a result of slower than anticipated startup in some public sector construction projects, although private sector construction activity expanded. Public administration, education, and health grew by 1.4%, 2.2%, and 3.1% respectively, reflecting government's ongoing investment in the social sector. Balance of payments. Mr. Speaker, the balance of payments at the end of 2012 reflected a surplus of $12.4 million compared to a deficit of $15 million in 2011. This outturn is mainly the result of improvement in the capital account due to higher foreign direct investment. Reflecting underlying growth in production and export volumes and aided by favorable price movements, export earnings expanded by 23.6% to $1.5 billion. Export receipts from sugar grew by 7.1% to $132.1 million, primarily due to favorable contract prices, which increased by 15.1% and outweighed a 6.9% reduction in volume. Rice export receipts grew by 13.3% to $196.2 million, underlying which were a 9.4% increase in volume and a 3.5% increase in prices. Gold exports amounted to $716.9 million, a 38.7% increase over 2011, with the industry benefiting from a 6% favorable price movement and a 30.8% increase in export volume. Bauxite exports increased by 13.1% to $150.8 million, with volumes increasing by 22.8% to offset a 7.8% decline in export prices. Timber exports totaled $39 million, a marginal decline of 0.1%, primarily associated with lower production and efforts to further strengthen forest monitoring and enforcement within the sector. Mr. Speaker, total imports expanded by 11.7% to $2 billion, within which was an 8% increase in the value of fuel and lubricants imported. Other imports increased by 13.5%, with non-fuel intermediate goods increasing by 12.8%, capital goods by 16.1%, led by increases in imports of heavy equipment for industry, and consumption goods by 11.7%. Net current transfers increased by 1.1% to $419.2 million, due to higher receipts of worker remittances, which increased by 13.9% to $469.3 million. Net payment of services amounted to $232.1 million, compared to $145.4 million due to a $94.7 million increase in non-factor services, mainly as a result of higher transport and freight costs and increased payments for business services. Notwithstanding the growth in imports, the significant expansion of export earnings helped to ensure that the current account deficit widened only marginally from $372.2 million to $394.8 million. On the capital account, a surplus of $428.5 million was achieved, compared to $373.2 million in 2011. This was driven by significant growth in foreign direct investment, mainly in the mining and quarrying and transport and communication sectors, resulting in total FDI increasing by 19% to $293.7 million in 2012. Mr. Speaker, as a result of these developments, the Bank of Guyana ended the year with total external reserves of $862.2 million, the highest end-of-year position ever in our country's history, and equivalent to 4 months of imports. Monetary developments. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, net domestic credit by the banking system expanded by 10.6% to $103.4 billion. Underlying this was continued strong growth in private sector credit by 20% to $161.5 billion at the end of 2012, with a 106.6% increase in credit to rice milling, a 51.5% increase in the mining and quarrying sector, a 28.4% increase in other manufacturing, a 26.5% increase in other services, a 17.8% increase in agriculture, a 17.2% increase in the personal sector, and a 13.6% increase in the lending for real estate category. The sustained growth in lending to the private sector, along with the price and exchange rate stability observed, Mr. Speaker, and on which I will report shortly, combine to confirm the appropriateness of our monetary policy stance. Prices and income, inflation rate. Mr. Speaker, government expended every effort on several fronts during the year to contain inflationary pressures and protect price stability. These efforts included excise tax adjustments to mute the pass-through of imported fuel price volatility, support to the Guyana Power and Light Inc. to avoid tariff increases, and continued investments towards the expansion of food production to ensure supply adequacy and price affordability. Altogether, these served to return an inflation rate of 3.5% at the end of 2012, well within acceptable norms. Interest rate. Mr. Speaker, the growth in private sector credit already reported on was aided by a notable reduction in the cost of borrowing in the banking system. During 2012, the weighted average lending rate of the commercial banks declined by 60 basis points to 11.08%. In addition, the small savings rate declined by 30 basis points to 1.69%, and the 91-day Treasury bill rate declined by 90 basis points to 1.45%. Exchange rate. Mr. Speaker, transactions on the domestic foreign exchange market grew by 12% to $6.8 billion US. Much of this growth was driven by increases in the value of trade transactions, remittances, and investment inflows. Key exchange rates remained stable throughout the year, and at the end of the year, the Guyana dollar was being traded against the US dollar at 204.5 compared to 203.75 a year ago. Developments in wages. Mr. Speaker, at a time when fiscal constraints are forcing many countries, even in our immediate region, to freeze public sector wages, our government has made it a priority to ensure that our public sector employees benefit from steady increases in their wages and salaries every year. Last year was no exception, and government granted a 5% across-the-board increase to all public servants and members of the disciplined services with effect from January 2012. A one-month basic salary tax-free incentive was also paid in December 2012 to members of the disciplined services. Furthermore, in keeping with the Memorandum of Understanding entered into between government and the Guyana Teachers Union for the years from 2011 to 2015, a 5% increase in salaries was granted to teachers in the public education system with effect from January 2012. Mr. Speaker, government continues to regard such multi-year agreements as the preferred mechanism for ensuring predictable salary increases going forward, and we will endeavor to conclude similar agreements with the representatives of other public sector employees. Fiscal position, non-financial public sector. Mr. Speaker, the non-financial public sector recorded a fiscal deficit of $26 billion, or 4.5% of GDP, broadly level with the 2011 deficit of 4.4%. Central government. Consistent with the expansion in economic activity, central government revenue, net of GRIF inflows, grew by 7% to $129.4 billion in 2012. Tax revenue collections, which represented 91.5% of total revenue collections, again net of GRIF inflows, amounted to $118.3 billion, a 6.2% increase over 2011. Internal revenue collections increased by 2.9% to $48.6 billion in 2012. Underlying this were an increase of 6.1% to $19.6 billion in corporation tax and an increase of 20.8% to $3.4 billion in income tax paid by self-employed persons. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, personal income tax under the PAYE system declined by 4.1% to $16.2 billion, as a result of the increase in the income tax threshold granted last year. Reflecting the growth in trade already reported on, customs and trade tax collections increased by 15.7% to $12.9 billion, primarily attributed to a 17.2% increase in import duties to $11.6 billion. Value-added tax and excise tax collections increased by 7.2% to $56.8 billion, with increased VAT collections from imports and domestic supplies, and increased excise tax collected in all categories of taxable goods except fuel. In the latter case, Mr. Speaker, collections declined by 27.8% to $6.6 billion as a result of the lowering of the applicable rate during the course of the year. Non-tax revenue collections recorded an increase of 16.3% to $11.1 billion, primarily on account of higher transfer of profits from the Bank of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, non-interest current expenditure amounted to $108.4 billion, an increase of 17.1% over 2011. This increase was attributed to an 11% increase in wages and salaries, a 1.4% increase in other goods and services, and a 43.2% increase in transfer payments. Wages and salaries increased primarily due to the across-the-board increase granted, and to which I referred earlier, along with new recruitment mainly in health and education. The 43.2% increase in transfer payments was due to the operating subventions granted to GPL and GAISUCO, along with the increase granted to old age pensioners. Capital expenditure increased by 12.6% to $56.4 billion due to the advancement of several key development projects. Public enterprises. Mr. Speaker, aided by the subventions just referred to, public enterprises were able to return a surplus of $1.6 billion compared to a deficit of $6.6 billion in 2011. In the case of GAISUCO, the subsidy supported the company in meeting its operating cash flow requirements, while in GPL's case, the company was similarly helped to meet its financing requirements without implementing an increase in electricity tariffs. Mr. Speaker, both companies continue to face severe cash flow constraints. Debt management. Mr. Speaker, having expended immeasurable effort to return our country to debt sustainability, our government has been extremely judicious in striking an appropriate balance between new borrowing to finance pending development needs on the one hand, and ensuring that debt sustainability remains uncompromised on the other. At the end of 2012, Guyana's total external debt stock stood at $1.4 billion, which represented an increase of 12.7% over the previous year, largely on account of the financed component of oil shipments under the Petrocaribe arrangement with Venezuela. Total external debt service in 2012 amounted to $42.5 million, or 6.4% more than in 2011, comprising principal repayments of $29.4 million and interest payments of $13.1 million. Towards the end of 2012, Guyana signed our first debt compensation agreement with Venezuela, which reduced the Petrocaribe debt owed to that country by $100.8 million, equivalent to the value of rice and paddy shipped from December 2009 to July 2011. Government expects to conclude imminently a second debt compensation agreement which will reduce the Petrocaribe debt to Venezuela by a further $186 million, equivalent to the value of paddy and rice shipped from July 2011 to January 2013. Also in 2012, Guyana finalized bilateral debt relief negotiations with the Russian Federation to write off 100% of the outstanding debt owed to that country, totaling $0.3 million. And the relevant bilateral debt cancellation agreement was signed in January 2013. sectoral developments and the agenda for 2013, the medium-term outlook. Mr. Speaker, as we embark on the exercise of considering the national budget for 2013, we must remind ourselves of the Guyana we are seeking to build. It is a Guyana that is modern and prosperous, whose economy is strong and resilient, whose institutions inspire confidence and provide protection, and whose citizens are motivated and accomplished. It is a Guyana that is physically integrated with its neighbors in South America and economically integrated with its neighbors in the Caribbean Sea. It is a Guyana whose comprehensive infrastructure network allows easy access to our natural resources and to move our goods and our people. It is a Guyana where all citizens have access to high-quality education, healthcare, and other social services, and where the Millennium Development Goals are met. It is a Guyana whose traditional industries like sugar, rice, and bauxite can compete on the world market, just as well as whose new and emerging sectors like tourism, telecommunications, and business process outsourcing can compete. It is a Guyana where every single man, woman, and child has access to and competence in information and communication technology. It is a Guyana where investors want to bring their business and where qualified persons want to work. It is a Guyana where every young person can find rewarding, productive employment and where every elderly person can retire in comfort. The attainment, Mr. Speaker, of such a Guyana is not beyond our grasp. On the contrary, it is well within our reach. Every program, every project, every activity, every initiative contained in Budget 2013 takes us one block closer to building this Guyana. Low carbon development strategy. Mr. Speaker, aligning responsible forest stewardship with accelerated economic development continues to be the paradigm overarching our policy framework. On this subject, Guyana's leadership and advocacy at the multilateral level continue, including within the Coalition of Rainforest Nations and more recently the Doha Conference of Parties, where Guyana was instrumental in effecting a roadmap for a REDD+ mechanism. Under our visionary low-carbon development strategy, at the end of 2012, Guyana fulfilled all the requirements for a third tranche of performance-based payments to the tune of $45 million US. This brings to a total of $115 million US, the amounts Guyana has earned under our partnership with Norway. This partnership, given the funds received and committed thus far, represents the second largest interim REDD+ arrangement in the world, is testimony to our government's commitment to good forest governance and stewardship, and vindicates the LCDS. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, funds began flowing from the Guyana REDD+ Investment Fund Trust Fund, the GRIF Trust Fund as it is popularly known, to implement projects identified under the LCDS. Monies have been disbursed from the GRIF for the $7 million US institutional strengthening project, which will support the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Office of Climate Change, and the Project Management Office, and for the $6 million US Amerindian Development Fund project, which provides financing to support the socio-economic development of Amerindian communities and villages through the implementation of their community development plans. In addition, the $5 million US micro and small enterprise development project has now been approved for implementation. Other projects to be funded under the GRIF include, most prominently, the flagship Amila Falls hydropower project, on which more is to be said later. Government continues to work with our counterparts in Norway and with our other development partners to accelerate the flow of funds to Guyana to implement projects and programs identified in the LCDS. In 2013, Guyana will continue to work strategically with the leadership of the Coalition of Rainforest Nations to ensure that an international mechanism for rainforest mitigation is brought to the next Conference of Parties for approval, and that more ambitious emission reduction targets are agreed by industrialized countries. Other LCDS projects, including the Amerindian Land Titling Project and a Climate Adaptation Project, will be brought before the GRIF Steering Committee for approval and will begin implementation later this year. Government will also launch an addendum to the LCDS, which will include a second wave of projects. Mr. Speaker, still under the GRIF, sums totaling $17.6 million are allocated in 2013 for the institutional strengthening, Amerindian Development Fund, Amerindian Land Titling, micro and small enterprise development, and other projects. In addition, a sum of $80 million is provided to fund Guyana's equity contribution to AMILA, transforming the economy, modernizing the traditional sectors. Mr. Speaker, while the traditional sectors might no longer be the lifeline of our economy given the substantial progress made in diversifying the productive base, they remain important to our overall economic performance, generating valuable export receipts and providing thousands of jobs. Ensuring their viability and profitability therefore remain policy priorities for this government. Sugar. Mr. Speaker, the sugar industry has been beset by issues associated with managerial capacity, unpredictable weather, and labor supply constraints, to name but a few. Consequently, annual production levels have been less than acceptable. On the upside, the external outlook for sugar remains positive, given Guyana's comparative advantage as a producer within CARICOM, the existence of a captive market protected by the CET, continued market access with the recent extension of the EU sugar regime to 2020, and the fact that Demerara remains a mark with considerable universal goodwill, even if not yet legally enforceable. Over the last few years, initiatives in field and factory operations have been undertaken to counter the labor shortages and the reduced opportunity days arising from changing rainfall patterns. Mechanical harvesting has been accelerated, and there are ongoing investments in drainage works and land conversion to mechanically friendly fields. Private cane farmers have been encouraged to take on a greater share in supply of canes to supplement Gaisuco's production. Meanwhile, the issues at Skeldon, a key and critical facility for overall improvement of the industry's performance, are being addressed holistically, and several modifications and adjustments have been completed to deliver higher levels of output and efficiencies. Mr. Speaker, as Gaisuco continues to grapple with the challenges of returning to its production potential and profitability, it has to recognize and confront its managerial, industrial, technical, marketing, and financial realities. Thus, an updated strategic plan for the period from 2013 to 2016 is currently being prepared. The plan will support the mechanization and field conversion drive and focus particularly on critical areas. A strong and committed management response is necessary to deliver the anticipated output from investments. Industry customs and practices of the past must now give way to modern, innovative, and creative tools and techniques to deal with managing a complex organization in the process of change. Gaisuco will have to re-engineer its management and human relations. Gaisuco will have to re-engineer its management and human relations functions accordingly. Promoting a harmonious industrial relations climate is an absolute priority and will require accommodation on all sides. Management and union will need to put aside the attitudinal and non-productive confrontations in their negotiations. Industrial relations practices are expected to become more interactive and congenial. Mr. Speaker, whereas Gaisuco's lands are capable of producing in excess of 400,000 tons of sugar, field interventions to address the weather and labor constraints can only be successful with the requisite agronomic inputs. Agricultural operations must capitalize on the relative advantages of each estate, ensure daily field supervision, and return the fields to the former levels of productivity. Focus will therefore be needed in determining the right balance of mechanization, field conversion, drainage and irrigation, transport infrastructure, and plant breeding within the full spectrum of agricultural-related interventions. The Factory Improvement Program will aim at producing sugars to meet the growing market requirements for higher quality, both in bulk and direct consumption sugars, with increased efficiencies at all 7 factories. A specific element of the plan will be to have the new packaging plant at Enmore operating at full capacity. Mr. Speaker, Gaisuco is projected to spend $3.1 billion in 2013 to advance implementation of critical recapitalization aspects of this plan. Rice. Mr. Speaker, our rice industry is well on its way to achieving and sustaining production of greater than 450,000 tons annually, while moving towards new and more premium varieties. The excellent performance of the industry in recent years is a vindication of the substantial investments made in drainage and irrigation infrastructure, coupled with the institutional capabilities accumulated in research and training for the benefit of the industry. Higher market prices have enabled financing for recapitalization in the industry, and the last 3 years have witnessed over $8 billion of private capital invested by millers to upgrade their mills and improve efficiency using new and modern technologies. As a result of our government's efforts to ensure a favorable business climate, a major investment of over $4 million has been made in the first phase of a large-scale project in Region 9, with 120 acres already cultivated and 2,000 acres to be cultivated by the end of 2013. This Santa Fe project aims to have 10,000 acres of rice cultivated by 2015 and will expand exports in the sector with markets already identified in Brazil. Mr. Speaker, the favorable business climate put in place by government also resulted in the milling operations of one of the larger but chronic defaulting millers being acquired by a foreign investor, with the anticipated consequence that much of the problems previously experienced with untimely payment by millers to farmers should be alleviated. In the area of research, following the successful pilot cultivation of Guyana's first line of aromatic rice last year, testing will commence across the country during 2013, with the expectation that at least 20 to 25 farmers will undertake the first commercial production of this rice. This will contribute to reduced imports of similar varieties of rice. Bauxite. Mr. Speaker, this government has worked hard to attract credible international investors to the local bauxite industry and to ensure they maintain their operations even in the most hostile of external conditions. At a time when bauxite plants around the world and even in our region have been closing operations, the domestic bauxite industry continued producing. In Guyana, the fortunes of the 2 major bauxite companies continue to be mixed. Bosai's operations continue to be supported by strong calcined bauxite prices of over $400 per ton, while BCGI's operations continue to be challenged by costs that exceed prevailing market prices. Increasing production and investment are nevertheless expected to continue, with Bosai planning to expand its product mix to include the production of metallurgical bauxite, while BCGI recently completed a $20 million investment in mobile equipment. Mr. Speaker, further increases in production are projected in 2013 and beyond by both Bosai and BCGI, with continued substantial investments being made by both companies. In 2013, Bosai's projected investments continue to target increasing volume. The company will continue to operate in the Dacoura and East Montgomery mines. BCGI will continue to invest in opening up its new mine at Kurubuka and making its operations more efficient, with production expected to commence in 2014 from this new location. BCGI's operations continue to be less than cash positive, necessitating financial support from its parent company for continued investment and to cover operating deficits. While higher levels of production supported by these investments are expected to lower average operating costs, it is recognized that Guyana's production costs for metallurgical bauxite are generally in the higher tier due to overburden, high logistical costs, and the high price of fuel for mobile equipment, drying, and transportation operations. A third bauxite company, First Bauxite Inc., is slated to start construction of a $120 million calcined operation in late 2013 at Bonasika. Government will continue to support the bauxite industry, recognizing that for each company, the cost structure and the market prices are quite different. Gold. Mr. Speaker, the gold mining sector has been playing an increasingly important role in the domestic economy, with production reaching unprecedented levels. The growth of the industry has resulted in significant job creation and multiplier economic activity in mining communities and indeed throughout the economy. Increased investment in the sector has resulted in innovative technology being utilized, and for the first time, a local miner is engaged in hard rock mining, while more land dredges and water pumps are being utilized to effect more efficient recovery and production. The industry is also one of the principal destinations for inward FDI, with several large-scale investments in the sector. Guyana Goldfields Inc. and ETK Sandspring Resources Limited are both expected to commence commercial production by 2015. Together, these investments will generate 550 jobs during the development phases and another 400 jobs during mining operations. Other large-scale investments by Sacré-Cœur Minerals Limited and Eagle Mountain Gold Corporation are underway and are anticipated to commence operations in 2014. Mr. Speaker, the demonstrated level of investor confidence and anticipated continued high price levels for gold on the world market augur extremely well for the sector. New and emerging sectors, information and communication technology. Mr. Speaker, information and communication technology, ICT, continues to be one of the principal means through which our government's agenda for modernization and transformation is being pursued. Government's commitment to the sector is driven by the recognition of how much ICT can contribute to economic diversification, creation of new and emerging job opportunities, improving competitiveness of existing and new businesses, and empowering citizens. Recognizing the abundant benefits of ICT to be accrued to the citizenry of Guyana, our government's commitment is to bring ICT access and competence within the reach of every single Guyanese person, and to promote the ICT sector as a primary employer in its own right. To this end, in keeping with our undertaking to put in place a legislative framework that would facilitate and support a liberalized sector, Government tabled in this Honorable House a new telecommunications bill and amendments to the Public Utilities Commission Act in 2012. We're also currently engaged in discussions with the major companies in the industry on the proposed legislative framework which, once enacted, will see transition to full competition. Also in 2012, a total of $1.9 billion was invested by government on acquiring and installing critical ICT infrastructure. Specifically, over 580 kilometers of fiber optic cable from Lethem to Georgetown with 5 repeater stations along the route, constructing and commissioning the government data center, which is now being tested, amongst other works. In 2013, over $2 billion is budgeted to advance this work, including provision for the construction of 54 LTEA towers to be strategically placed in the most densely populated areas from Molson Creek to Charity, Linden, and Lethem. Once completed, Mr. Speaker, e-government services and content will be delivered to all of the major population centers using this network. In order to ensure that the most vulnerable communities and individuals benefit from access to ICT, amounts totaling $1.6 billion were spent in 2012 under the One Laptop per Family program to procure over 28,000 laptops. This resulted in a total of 56,000 laptops being purchased under this program. To date, Mr. Speaker, 26,832 laptops have been distributed. 18,714 persons have been trained, and these include 4,596 first-time computer users. In 2013, further amounts totaling $2.5 billion have been allocated to continue this program, including to purchase a further 34,000 laptops for rolling out distribution more widely. Of this total, Mr. Speaker, an amount of $500 million is earmarked for the implementation of the program in the hinterland, which will see computer banks and supportive power supply installed in every Amerindian village. In addition, government will work closely with current and potential investors in the business process outsourcing sector to encourage and facilitate establishment and expansion of their operations, diversify their geographical spread, and promote closer alignment between the basic prerequisite skills held by their potential recruits with the input requirements of this buoyant sector. The result of all these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, will be a computer literate population, a more competent and competitive workforce, and accelerated investments in the ICT sector as a source of rapid job creation in Guyana. Oil. Mr. Speaker, petroleum exploration continued apace in 2012. Although the drilling of exploration wells offshore in the prospecting areas licensed to Repsol was terminated out of caution, there were encouraging indications of petroleum. A test well was drilled by CGX to the total planned depth, but the outcome was not as favorable as anticipated. The acquisition of new marine 3D seismic data by CGG Veritas within the prospecting area licensed to Esso Shell commenced in November 2012, and new petroleum prospecting licenses and/or renewals were issued for further work in several locations, including the Takatu Basin, the Deepwater South Stabroek Block, and the Corentyne Block. Repsol is also in pursuit of continuing activity on the block referred to as the Georgetown Block, and the transitioning to a new license and agreement were at a very advanced stage at the end of 2012. In addition to these developments, work was sustained in the Berbice River at Grand Canal, where wharf and terminal facilities were being constructed for use in petroleum operations logistics. In 2013, exploration operations are expected to continue with 3D seismic surveys by Esso, Repsol, and CGX. Several new licenses are expected to be issued as companies transition from dated 10-year arrangements so that their operational focus would be maintained. Recognizing the potential for Guyana to move from exploration through discovery to production within the foreseeable future, government is actively considering the requisite policy and institutional frameworks that need to be in place. Such frameworks will include addressing environmental considerations, contract management and administration, sustainable management of oil revenues, and enhancing competitiveness in non-oil sectors in order to avoid Dutch disease effects. Agricultural diversification. Mr. Speaker, government attaches high priority to promoting new and non-traditional agricultural products, developing infrastructure, adopting new and emerging technologies, and providing our farmers with financial and technical support. Government remains committed to creating a conducive environment to reinforce Guyana's position as the Caribbean leader in agricultural production, with a view to developing the sector in an efficient and sustainable manner, especially given the vicissitudes of climate change. In 2012, over $1 billion was spent to advance efforts towards the diversification and modernization of the sector. In 2013, $1.9 billion has been allocated to this sector. In order to ensure that an adequate regulatory framework is established to guide and support the advancement of the sector, several legislative initiatives will continue to be undertaken during the year. These include work on new regulations for fisheries, traceability of both crops and livestock, and animal welfare, all necessary in order to fulfill international trade requirements. Furthermore, since the design was completed earlier this year for the 5,500 acres of uncultivated land in the Aurora area, work will commence to clear the land in preparation for livestock rearing and production of rice, citrus, and other vegetables. In the fishery sector, emphasis will be placed on certifying sustainable fishing practices in an effort to qualify for higher export prices. In addition, production for export will commence at the newly established tilapia farms with a view to significantly increasing tilapia production. Support for diversification in the sector will also come from strengthening infrastructure. A veterinary diagnostic laboratory will be constructed at Mon Repos. Additional drainage works will be undertaken at Canals Polder, and a hatchery to increase production of ducklings will be established. Finally, efforts will be directed towards building our human resource base in order to benefit from Guyana's full potential to accelerate agricultural development. During the course of the year, training in aquaculture production will be imparted to 250 persons nationwide, and local specialists will benefit from training in seed technology and germplasm development. In keeping with our drive to promote large-scale private investment in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, a landmark private sector investment to which I've already alluded has resulted in a 30,000-acre integrated farm, the Santa Fe farm to which I referred when I was addressing the rice sector. Once phase one of this project is completed, the intention is to expand production beyond cultivation of rice, soybeans, and cowpeas, and rearing of cattle, sheep, and goats, to include permanent fruits and large-scale aquaculture. Like the rice, other produce will also be mainly exported to Brazil, where the technology that is being used to develop this farm originated. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, a sum of $500 million is allocated to fund the establishment of a farmer fertilizer and planting material facility, which will ensure access to quality planting materials and other inputs, including fertilizer and enhanced extension services. Mr. Speaker, this intervention will boost and strengthen food production and will target more than 3,000 farmers and reinvigorate the highly successful Grow More Food campaign. Tourism. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the unique ecotourism and environmental products that our country has to offer, and acknowledging the potential of the tourism sector as a major driver of job creation and sustainable economic growth, government continues to invest in increasing capacity in the sector, raising standards, developing market and product niches, and promoting the destination. The market has responded to government's efforts in this regard, with increased private investment in the sector, significant growth in visitor arrival, and higher levels of property occupancy. In 2012, arrivals totaled 176,642, a 12.6% increase over 2011. And the industry recorded average occupancy rates in the vicinity of 75%. Also in 2012, construction commenced on the $58 million Marriott Hotel and progressed apace. Once completed, this 197-room hotel will be Guyana's first five-star hotel property and our only major internationally branded hotel. And it will significantly raise industry standards. Guyana also successfully hosted major industry events, including the 13th Caribbean Sustainable Tourism Conference, won several industry awards, and received substantial coverage from mainstream international travel media. In 2013, government will continue efforts towards the development of a vibrant tourism industry. Focus will be placed on marketing, product development, and capacity building of industry stakeholders. Work will commence on a 5-year hinterland tourism development plan, which will focus on tourism opportunities, economic, social, and environmental benefits, culture and heritage preservation, investment opportunities, and training. Efforts will be heightened to market the destination to film and television producers of the reality and adventure genre with wide viewership, and to obtain coverage in strategic niche publications such as sport fishing and birding. Further, institutional capacity to train personnel for the hospitality industry will be expanded, and training programs delivered to all categories of industry personnel with the aim of raising standards and improving service quality. In addition, Mr. Speaker, efforts will continue to engage international airlines to increase airlift into Guyana. Turning to small business. Mr. Speaker, small and medium-sized enterprises are pivotal to creating grassroots economic opportunities, supporting income-generating ventures, improving livelihoods, enhancing productivity, and stimulating competitiveness. In this regard, and in continued support of the dynamic growth potential of SMEs, government has provided added stimuli to this sector through several initiatives, including easier access to credit, business advisory and marketing services and systems, and training. In 2012, the Small Business Bureau commenced the development of a policy framework for small businesses and held a number of training workshops and seminars to improve the technical skills of small business owners. In this regard, several owners benefited from sessions dealing with such matters as customer care and service, standards for the arts and crafts sector. In addition, 561 small and micro businesses were added to the Bureau's database, bringing the total to 1,805 registered businesses at the end of the year. In 2013, the Small Business Development Fund will be fully operationalized through the collateral guarantee, the interest subsidy, and the low-carbon grant schemes at a cost of $370 million, thereby increasing small business access to financing. Over 100 sessions on business management, agro-processing, food handling, packaging, labeling, marketing and information technology are also scheduled for this year, targeting 1,000 business owners. Mr. Speaker, under the Women of Worth microcredit facility, $16.4 million was disbursed by our private sector partner to 83 women comprising 61 new borrowers and 22 returning borrowers in 2012. To date, over $180 million has been disbursed as startup capital to 1,760 single mothers. The beneficiaries engaged in small-scale entrepreneurial activity in poultry rearing, garment manufacturing, leather craft, and cosmetology, thereby contributing to improved welfare among single mothers and increasing the number of small businesses in Guyana. The WOW program will continue in 2013 with renewed focus and will be launched in previously unserved or underserved areas, including Region 1, where it is expected that more than 100 applicants will be able to access microcredit loans. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the program will provide training to its beneficiaries in such areas as basic entrepreneurial skills, networking, basic accounting, promotion, advertising, and packaging. Mr. Speaker, turning to physical infrastructure for transformation, roads and bridges. Our government continues to expand, improve, rehabilitate, and maintain our road network with the aim to reduce transportation cost, improve market access, create and upgrade linkages to hinterland communities, improve traveling conditions and road safety, and enhance regional and hemispheric connectivity. In 2012, a total of $9.4 billion was expended on the construction, rehabilitation, and maintenance of our land transport network. Amongst these works, government completed reconstruction on the 35-kilometer Blackbush-Polder Ring Road, improving access to over 18,000 acres of rice, cattle, and cash crops, and 18.8 kilometers of all-weather roads to serve the communities of East and West Kanji. Additionally, street lighting was installed from number 61 to 66 villages and number 74 village on the Quarantine Coast. In 2013, government will invest $12.6 billion to further improve our roads and bridges network. Of this sum, $11.2 billion will be spent on roads and $1.4 billion on bridges. $4 billion has been made available for the completion of the 4-lane access road to the Chedijagan International Airport, the continuation of the East Bank Demerara 4-lane highway, the completion of the designs and commencement of works on the Sheriff Street to Mandela Avenue roadway, the upgrade of the 30.5-kilometer West Coast Demerara road from Vredenhoop to Hydroni, and the continuation of the widening of the highway from Better Hope to Golden Grove. Further, Mr. Speaker, government will complete the designs and commence construction of 14 kilometers of farm to market roads at Parika and Ruby back dams, thus opening access to over 330 farming households and over 2,000 acres of mixed crop farming. Government will also complete the designs for the extension of the 4-lane highway from Diamond to Timeri, the East Bank Berbice Road, and canals Polder numbers 1 and 2 roads, and commence preparatory works for a new community roads improvement project. An amount of $6.6 billion is allocated for the construction, rehabilitation, upgrade, and maintenance of roads in all regions, including the Mabura Hill to Amila Falls Road, and the rehabilitation of 20 critical structures from Belladrum to Rossignol. $300 million has been allocated for the rehabilitation of pontoons, buoys, sheaves and shackles, anchor chains, and other installations to improve the structural integrity of the Demerara Harbour Bridge, and $35 million for street lighting from Bellevue to Potentia, sections of the Linden Highway, the Abari and Kanji bridges, number 44 to 54 villages, Quarantine, and the Molson Creek Stelling approach. Mr. Speaker, government has commenced technical examination. Mr. Speaker, government has commenced technical examination of the options for constructing a new bridge across the Demerara River. It is envisaged that during 2013, government will invite expressions of interest for a public-private partnership for this project. It is also important to note that despite the imminent completion of the 4-lane highway, it is already becoming evident that an alternative East Bank Demerara bypass road is necessary to ease congestion. To this end, government will commence preparatory works for the design of a parallel secondary road to the East Bank Demerara highway. Air, air, and river transport. Mr. Speaker, the expansion and modernization of the air and river transport infrastructure is vital to provide linkages between the coastal areas and remote communities in the hinterland regions, to facilitate improved transportation, social integration, communication, the trade of goods and services, and further improve our tourism base. In 2012, amounts totaling $5.4 billion were expended by the sector, including to pay a mobilization advance to commence works on the upgrade, expansion, and modernization of the CJIA. Rehabilitate and maintain over 40 airstrips. Procure high-frequency radio and security systems for our international airports, and on the docking of vessels and acquisition of spares. The modification of Parika and Supanam stellings was completed to facilitate the roll-on, roll-off ferry service, which became operational in the third quarter this service provided substantial relief for the commuting public of Regions 2 and 3. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, a total of $5.3 billion has been budgeted for the CJIA project. Works will commence on the construction of a new terminal building, aprons, air bridges, taxiways, and the extension of the runway by a further 3,500 feet. This project will provide Guyana with the infrastructure to accommodate the widest variety of aircraft type and become an international travel hub. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, $248 million is allocated for the rehabilitation of airstrips in Matthews Ridge, in Baimadai, and Camarang, and the maintenance of 43 other airstrips in regions 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. A sum of $80 million will be spent to procure an automated dependent surveillance broadcast to bring precision and reliability of satellite-based surveillance to our national airspace. Finally, Mr. Speaker, $683 million is budgeted for the docking of several ferry vessels, the acquisition of spares, and the rehabilitation of the Bartica Stelling. Mr. Speaker, government remains cognizant of the need to keep our main commercial riverine channels passable by ocean-going vessels. In particular, access to the Demerara port by optimally sized vessels is a critical prerequisite to trade activity. Government is engaged and will continue discussions with the private sector on options to address the matter of dredging and maintaining the Demerara Channel, sea and river defense. Mr. Speaker, we are in a constant battle to protect and maintain the structural integrity of our sea and river defense structures, and to develop sustainable shore zone management systems to contain the ravages of the ever-encroaching Atlantic Ocean. Over the years, we have suffered frequent intrusion, overtopping, and inundation due to aged, porous, or weak sea defense structures. As such, government has continued to make significant investments to protect against flooding of our residential and farming communities. In 2012, the sum of $2.4 billion was spent to reconstruct, rehabilitate, and maintain critical sea defenses throughout our coastline. Importantly, during the year, 189,273 mangrove seedlings were planted at selected locations, which restored some 9.4 kilometers of mangrove forest. Additionally, our first geotextile breakwater structure was completed and made functional. Mr. Speaker, the sum of $1.9 billion is budgeted to ensure the further strengthening of our sea and river defenses. Critical works will be done in regions 2 to 7 in areas such as Johanna Cecilia, Blenheim, Laritreat, and Abari. In addition, the mangrove restoration and replanting program will entail the planting of a further 115,000 seedlings in areas such as Devonshire Castle, Lima, La Belle Alliance, Richmond, Anna Regina, Kilmarnock, and Bushlot, as we continue the implementation of the 5-year National Mangrove Action Plan. Drainage and irrigation. Recognizing the importance of agriculture to our national development agenda and conscious of the negative effects of flooding due to climate change, the management and operational efficiency of our drainage and irrigation systems is key and critical to agricultural production and productivity. In 2012, government expended $7.1 billion on drainage and irrigation systems to continue to develop structures at Hope Dutch 4, procure long-arm excavators and pontoons, and construct, rehabilitate, and maintain drains, canals, and other structures throughout our coast. In 2013, a total of $6.5 billion is budgeted for the final payments towards acquisition of fixed irrigation pumps, the construction and rehabilitation of pump stations in regions 3, 4, 5, and 6, the completion of the Northern Relief Channel and associated drainage structures, the rehabilitation of intake structures at Ansgrove, Hope, Annandale, and Nancy, the excavation of outfall channels in the regions, the rehabilitation of pontoons and excavators and relief sluices such as those at Maduni and Sarah Joanna. And this year, Mr. Speaker, would also see the completion of a safety and feasibility analysis of the East Demerara Water Conservancy Dam, where the existing earthen dam and structures will be evaluated and recommendations made for necessary improvements. An analysis would also be completed for villages along the east coast of Demerara, which are vulnerable to flooding, and recommendations presented. Further, a plan for operating the Conservancy and a detailed list of works for improving flows and discharge will be completed this year. Energy, power generation, and supply. Mr. Speaker, the provision of a reliable and affordable energy supply is the cornerstone of our competitiveness and development policies. To this end, government is dedicated to creating the enabling energy environment that will serve to catalyze increased production of value-added goods and services and improve the quality of life of our citizens. In 2012, an amount of $15.9 billion was invested in the electricity sector to procure 3 Wärtsilä generators with a total capacity of 26 megawatts, install a 1.9-kilometer submarine cable linking Kingston and Vredenhoek, energize 13.8 kilometers of overhead transmission lines between Vredenhoek and Edinburgh, complete 2 new substations at Vredenhoek and Edinburgh, and expand the Kingston substation, replace 11,989 regular meters with prepaid meters, and install 565 Itron meters on new connections. In 2013, sums totaling $16.4 billion are allocated for the installation of the new Wärtsilä engines at Vredenhoek, construction and upgrading of 7 substations, installation of transmission lines from Sofia to Anvawakt, along with a supervisory control and data acquisition system commonly called SCADA, and completion of the ongoing frequency conversion program, among other works. In addition, GPL will develop new initiatives to combat losses. On the technical side, a pilot program will seek to rewire sections of the distribution network to improve efficiency and reduce incidents of illegal connections. On the commercial side, a pilot program will seek to introduce a remetering initiative using smart meters and modern technology to combat theft of electricity. Subject to the success of these pilots, a program to rebuild the distribution network and replace over 70,000 meters will be initiated in 2013 and advanced beyond. Finally, recognizing the need for a markedly more efficient off-taker once a miler comes into production, a corporate development plan for GPL is currently being designed to target a more efficient utility with lower losses, reduced supply interruptions, enhanced planning and execution capacity, and a strengthened organizational structure. Mr. Speaker, in the area of hinterland electrification, government distributed and installed solar home systems in 161 villages to a total of 10,601 households. The schematic layout for a new hydropower system at Cato was completed and the procurement process launched. In addition, $73 million was spent on the construction, upgrade, and extension of systems at Matthews Ridge, Moruka, and Barabina, and on the acquisition and installation of solar panels, transformers, and generators in other areas. In 2013, a total of $452 million will be spent on the construction of the 330 kilowatt hydropower and irrigation system on the Chung River at Cato, benefiting over 2,700 persons and providing clean energy to support agricultural and commercial activities, along with educational training. Relocate the Lethem power plant. Upgrade and extend the electricity grids at Mabaruma, Marabina, Moruka, and Matthews Ridge, and acquire solar panels for areas such as Batavia, Maikobi, Princeville, Murawa, Anai, Aishalton, and Waipa. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Amila Falls project remains the flagship of our medium and long-term strategy for the electricity sector. Significant milestones were achieved in 2012 with the signing of the engineering, procurement, and construction agreement between Scythe Global and China Railway First Group, and the mandate letter between the Inter-American Development Bank and Scythe Global. Work will continue apace towards achieving financial close before the end of 2013. Investments in our people. Education. Mr. Speaker, this government recognizes education as essential for reducing poverty, supporting personal empowerment, and achieving national development. With this in mind, an amount of $26.5 billion was expended in this sector in 2012. Of that amount, $2.9 billion was spent on construction, extension, rehabilitation, and maintenance of educational facilities countrywide to ensure increased access. In an effort to increase enrollment and attendance rates of children in schools, as well as reduce the dropout rate, over $1.2 billion was spent on the school feeding program, which benefited over 64,000 students. Additionally, $297.6 million was spent on the National School Uniform Program, which benefited over 190,000 children in nursery, primary, and educations and secondary schools. Significant gains have also been made in increasing the percentage of trained teachers in the public education system. And in particular, 2,965 teachers were trained in ICT. Amounts totaling $1.3 billion were expended to equip and staff technical and vocational institutions, which continue to provide an alternative education pathway for our youths. Another $1.3 billion was allocated to the University of Guyana, of which $450 million represented loans to students. Mr. Speaker, amounts totaling $28.7 billion have been budgeted for the education sector in 2013, bringing to a total the amount of $139 billion allocated over the period 2008 to 2013 to finance the National Education Strategic Plan. The sector is currently engaged in the development of a new 5-year strategic plan. This year, the physical infrastructure of schools and other educational facilities countrywide will benefit from an investment of over $3 billion. This includes construction of Cato Secondary Complex, which provides for 350 students. The construction of 1 Mile Primary, the reconstruction of 1 Mile Primary, and extensions to Alexander Village Nursery, East Street Nursery, St. Barnabas Special School, Tutorial Academy, and Tagore Memorial Secondary. Of the total amount provided, $1.1 billion is budgeted for the school feeding program, which will see over 64,000 school children benefiting from either juices and fortified biscuits or a hot meal. In addition, the school uniform program will continue to reduce the financial burden on families and will see 1 school uniform distributed to every child attending a school in the public education system from nursery to grade 11. Emphasis will continue to be placed on increasing the presence of trained teachers in the classroom, and some 409 newly trained teachers are expected to enter the education system in August 2013. In an effort to strengthen the management and quality of staff members, lecturers, and administrators, training will be conducted to ensure use of ICT in the delivery of the curriculum. This will complement the 35 IT labs which are expected to be completed in 2013, while 3,000 teachers will be trained in ICT literacy, bringing us closer to the target of having all secondary schools equipped with computers and all secondary teachers trained in the use of computers for education delivery. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest in the University of Guyana with an allocation of $1.7 billion, including student loans of $450 million. A feasibility study for the new Center of Excellence for the Study of Biodiversity and a management and personnel study of the university's human resources will commence this year. Moreover, through the $10 million project to strengthen the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences, technical assistance and other support to lecturers will be provided to programs relevant to the LCDS, while grants would be provided to researchers towards generating knowledge products that directly contribute to the LCDS. Mr. Speaker, in support of this, 14 laboratories in the science and technology faculties will be rehabilitated, while full internet connectivity will be provided to all faculties and the library. This project, Mr. Speaker, represents a major government investment in the university, and in particular in its science and technology teaching and research capability. Mr. Speaker, included in the total amount provided to the University of Guyana is a sum of $50 million allocated by government to the university to promote greater access to tertiary level education by establishing online programs. Health. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to ensuring that our citizens have access to high-quality healthcare services. To this end, over $17 billion was expended in 2012, the final year of the National Health Strategic Plan, 2008 to 2012. A total of $1 billion was spent to expand, upgrade, and maintain the infrastructural facilities of the sector, including to fund a mobilization payment for the state-of-the-art specialty surgical hospital at Liliendaal, which will afford Guyanese the opportunity to access specialized healthcare services, upgrade of the National Psychiatric Hospital and the Georgetown School of Nursing, and construction of the Port Morant Health Center. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, $335 million was spent on training of public health care personnel to meet the growing demand for both basic and specialized services. In addition, the sector benefited from the return of another batch of Cuban-trained Guyanese doctors deployed to the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, the New Amsterdam Hospital, and several other facilities. Government also executed other critical aspects of the sector's mandate through the provision of expanded services including tuberculosis and malaria testing, numerous vaccination campaigns, introduction of dialysis services and knee and hip replacement surgery, and medical evacuation of critically ill patients from hinterland locations. In 2013, the health sector will advance development of a new strategic plan. This will incorporate lessons learned from the previous plan while consolidating the gains made over the past 5 years. In this context, $19.2 billion has been allocated this year to the sector, with the aim of achieving universal health coverage through the primary health care approach. To this end, Mr. Speaker, over $2.3 billion has been allocated for the construction, rehabilitation, and maintenance of health infrastructure countrywide, of which $1.3 billion has been budgeted for the state-of-the-art specialty surgical hospital and the Port Kaituma District Hospital. In an effort to improve the supply chain management system, a new pharmaceutical and medical warehouse equipped with necessary software was commissioned earlier this year, and which is expected to result in a more efficient distribution network for drugs and medical supplies. Over $369 million has been budgeted for human resource development to enhance the competency of health officials. The system will benefit from the return of a further 278 Cuban-trained doctors who will be deployed countrywide. Further, in the context of specialized care, the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, in collaboration with overseas universities, will be offering postgraduate programs in gynecology, orthopedics, internal medicine, pediatrics, emergency medicine, anesthesiology, and surgery. Mr. Speaker, maternal health is a top priority in government's healthcare agenda, with a view to advancing progress towards the reduction of maternal mortality and under 5 mortality. In early March, national consultations were held to develop an action plan towards eliminating remaining bottlenecks in the provision of quality maternal health care services as part of the MDG acceleration framework process. The under 5 mortality concerns are being addressed with, among other things, a neonatal intensive care unit being established at the GPHC with support from an overseas-based partner. This initiative will be expanded through the same partnership in Linden and West Demerara. In an effort to intensify the fight against malaria, government has budgeted for the procurement and distribution of over 6,000 long-lasting insecticide-treated bed nets for hinterland communities, primarily in mining areas. In addition, chronic non-communicable diseases now present a particular challenge for Guyana and the world as we overcome infectious diseases of previous types. And budget allocations within the sector will increasingly target addressing this shift. Housing. Mr. Speaker, the vision of this government for the housing sector remains grounded on the principle of housing all our citizens in sustainable settlements. As such, continued emphasis is placed on providing access to affordable housing, developing new sustainable housing schemes, increasing the provision of turnkey housing, expanding construction of core homes, advancing the resolution of unplanned housing settlements, promoting community development planning, and implementing a hinterland housing improvement program. In 2012, a sum of $4.7 billion was expended in the sector towards increasing access to affordable housing, improving the quality of infrastructure for housing schemes, and regularizing squatter settlements. 9 one-stop shop outreaches were held. 5,869 house lots were allocated. 4,996 land titles were processed. 2,577 of them were distributed. 75 core homes were constructed and distributed, bringing the total number of Guyanese benefiting from this core home pilot to 116 households in Region 3, 4, and 5. Mr. Speaker, for 2013, the government has allocated $3.1 billion to the housing sector for citizens to have improved access to housing and to improve quality of life. To this end, 5,900 house lots will be distributed and over 4,000 land titles processed and distributed. In addition, a total of 210 additional core houses will be constructed and allocated. Through the innovative Turnkey initiative, 48 professionals between the ages of 25 and 35 will have an opportunity to own a 1,600 square foot home at an affordable cost. Additionally, over 200 home improvement subsidies will be distributed to families on the coastland and 125 to hinterland families. Also in 2013, government will advance preparation of a scaled-up
Members, I believe the minister is being interrupted.
Also in 2013, government will advance preparation of a scaled-up young professional housing program. With semi-gated communities being developed to meet the needs of this growing demographic group. Water. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to make significant investments in the water sector, placing emphasis on ensuring that all Guyanese have access to an acceptable supply of potable water. Over the medium term, attention will be placed on expanding the delivery of treated water and consolidating the gains in the sector, while still expanding access to safe water in the hinterland. During 2012, over $2.2 billion was expended in the sector, including for installation of transmission and distribution mains, upgrading of water treatment plants, completion of boreholes, etc. In particular, contracts were awarded for the construction of new treatment plants at Wizrock and Amelia's ward to provide over 30,000 residents with safer water. 7 photovoltaic systems were installed, 5 water supply systems upgraded, and a medium-depth borehole was constructed at Sand Creek, benefiting some 10,000 hinterland residents. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, $2.7 billion has been budgeted to increase the level and quality of potable water supply. This amount will fund, amongst other things, the construction and completion of wells at Cotton Tree, Hope, Sparendam, and Lokaba, the upgrade of service connections on the east coast of Demerara and East Berbice, and the construction of a storage tank at Bartica, which together will benefit over 82,000 persons in regions 2 to 7. Also, the water supply system, my apologies, Mr. Speaker, in areas such as Karakara, Nottinghamshire, Watuka, and Richmond Hill, benefiting over 5,000 persons, will be upgraded. 2 water treatment plants at Wizrock and Amelia's ward will be constructed, along with the installation of transmission mains and district meters, thereby benefiting approximately 30,000 residents. These projects are expected to provide for the reduction of non-revenue water, improve level of service, reliability, quality, and treated water coverage. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the development of the hinterland communities and improving the quality of life of our indigenous people, the sum of $160 million is budgeted for the Hinterland Water Supply Program. This will benefit in excess of 15,000 persons within regions 1, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Sanitation. Mr. Speaker, government's commitment to ensuring a safer and more efficient sanitation system that will improve public health and contribute to sustainable economic development remains unquestionable. This is evident in the significant investments being made in the establishment of a national and regional solid waste management strategy and the Georgetown Sanitation Improvement Program. In 2012, over $500 million was spent to procure equipment and materials to start rehabilitation works on 9 sewer pumping stations within the Georgetown sewer network. $367.6 million was spent on the continued construction of the waste receiving facility at Hags Bush. Substantial work was carried out on cell 1 of the said facility, which continued to receive municipal solid waste at an average of over 320 tons daily, well above the original design specification of 250 tons per day. In addition, government distributed over 120,000 tablets to fight the spread and transmission of filaria and other waterborne diseases caused by contact with contaminated water and soil between Melanie and Timeri. In 2013, $600 million is budgeted to continue rehabilitation works on the Georgetown sewer systems to bring benefits to over 40,000 households within the project area. The completion of the energy efficiency pilot project, which is intended to reduce energy consumption at selected pumping stations, and the continued distribution of another 900,000 tablets to treat filaria and other neglected tropical diseases. Mr. Speaker, in addition, $732 million is budgeted for the Hagsbush sanitary landfill facility, which will facilitate the procurement of rare compaction vehicles and associated bins, a public awareness strategy and campaign, completion of infrastructural works on the Cell 1, leachate treatment facilities, and stormwater ponds. When completed, Mr. Speaker, Hagsbush will serve over 300,000 residents from Cane Grove to Timeri, including Georgetown, and will adequately receive and process over 320 tons of municipal solid waste daily. Vulnerable groups and other targeted interventions. Children. Mr. Speaker, this government remains committed to ensuring that all children have access to the care they deserve, thus granting them the opportunity to attain the skills and knowledge to become productive citizens. In 2012, the Child Care and Protection Agency successfully removed 396 children from abusive situations and reintegrated 81 into their biological families while providing ongoing psychosocial support. Social work interventions focused on parental counseling and education and training in order to prevent unnecessary separation of children from parents. The foster care program was expanded with an additional 46 children being placed in a family setting, and a new visiting committee was launched to ensure compliance with minimum standards. In 2013, in order to better care for those children who have been made vulnerable by inadequate parental care or child abuse, the expanded Mahaika Children's Hospital is set to be opened. 100 boys and girls stand to benefit from the expanded facility. Throughout 2013, work will also continue on an in-depth program for independent living skills and transitional housing for those children who are set to age out of the formal care system. Moreover, this year, the Child Care and Protection Agency will decentralize its operations with the aim of assigning child care officers and bringing services to all 10 regions. In 2013, sums totaling $234 million will be spent on child care and protection services. Mr. Speaker, as with our children, government remains committed to ensuring that all our youth are prepared to take their rightful place in society and are equipped to make meaningful and fulfilling contributions. To this end, we have designed and are implementing a number of programs targeting primarily vulnerable youth. During 2012, over 1,700 young people benefited from training under several programs, including the National Training Program for Youth Empowerment, the Apprenticeship Program, and the Youth Entrepreneurial Skills Training Program. 2013, over 2,500 young people will benefit from similar training programs, equipping them with the skills that are needed to enter the world of work or to embark on entrepreneurial ventures of their own. An amount of $65.2 million has been allocated to equip and rehabilitate our training programs. In addition, a sum of $200 million has been allocated for a youth entrepreneurship and apprenticeship program targeted at hinterland youth. In the area of sports and sports facilities, government remains resolute in our aim to ensure that all Guyanese, particularly young people, are exposed and have access to the best facilities to develop their sporting abilities. In 2012, over $360 million was expended on the construction of the athletic track at Leonora, completion of Bartica Community Center, upgrading of facilities at the National Gymnasium and the Cliff Anderson Sports Hall, Colgrain Pool and the Racket Center, along with upgrading sports grounds countrywide. In 2013, over $1 billion has been allocated to the sector. Of this amount, $560 million has been budgeted for advancing works on the athletic track at Leonora, $52 million for the warm-up pool at the National Aquatic Center, and a further $300 million for the development and upgrade of other sporting facilities and infrastructure countrywide. Once completed, these facilities will constitute a significant addition to the stock of public facilities and infrastructure for sports development and sporting activity. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, government continued to deliver on its commitment to assist single parents living under difficult circumstances. The programs included the Board of Industrial Training, the Women of Worth program, to which I've referred earlier, and the Women's Leadership Institute. The WOW initiative will be reinvigorated and formally launched in Region 1. In collaboration with the private sector partner, training sessions will also be delivered in relevant areas. Mr. Speaker, a further 400 single parents are expected to benefit from training on the BIT's single parent program, while the GWLI will be prioritizing training in areas of capacity building, basic literacy, and numeracy skills. Elderly. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, this government continued its efforts to improve the lives of our senior citizens. Over 42,000 pensioners currently benefit from the provision of a monthly non-contributory old age pension, which is intended to be a partial supplement to help meet their basic needs. In addition, provisions were made to ensure improved quality of care at the Palms Geriatric Institution, which throughout last year catered for the needs of over 200 elderly persons. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the National Commission for the Elderly was constituted and commenced discharging its mandate. In 2013, a key highlight will be the work of the Commission on ensuring that appropriate standards of care are followed in private homes, as well as in government-managed facilities. Homeless. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, the night shelter continued to be a point of reference for approximately 200 homeless persons every day, providing them with accommodation, meals, and medical assistance. This facility will continue its operations in 2013. This year, Mr. Speaker, an amount of $54 million has been provided to complete and operationalize the Center for Rehabilitation and Reintegration at Anvawat for the benefit of 180 street dwellers. Indigenous communities. Mr. Speaker, our government's uncompromising position is that every single Guyanese citizen must have access to the same opportunities, irrespective of where they live. To this end, our aim is to ensure that the economies of Amerindian villages are put on a more sustainable path, and that improved social services are delivered to their communities. The year 2012 saw the continuation of land titles being issued, while an amount of $160 million was approved for community development interventions in the area of ecotourism, provision of agricultural tools, provision of means of transportation, and establishment of village offices. Collectively, these are expected to improve agricultural productivity, communication, and governance. Under the National Hinterland Secure Livelihood Program, $4.4 million was expended to support agricultural, aquaculture, and beekeeping projects to the benefit of 241 farmers living in 15 different communities. In addition, 362 students benefited from the Hinterland Scholarship Program, and 62 students graduated from secondary and technical institutions. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, our government will continue efforts to advance development in all our Amerindian communities. To this end, the sum of $77.9 million has been allocated to the Land Titling and Demarcation Program, with a view to completing the titling of all eligible villages by the end of the year. In addition, work will continue on the development of community development plans with the expectation of commencing implementation of 180 of them. Some $350 million is provided to finance the implementation of these plans. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, under the Hinterland Scholarships Program, $66 million has been allocated to the benefit of 388 students. In addition, as already indicated, a sum of $200 million has been allocated to support an Amerindian youth entrepreneurship apprenticeship scheme, and a further sum of $500 million to roll out the OLPF to Amerindian villages. Other vulnerable groups. Mr. Speaker, our government's commitment to improve the livelihoods of the most vulnerable citizens of our country is further reflected in the continued emphasis which was placed on the public assistance program throughout 2012. Disadvantaged individuals benefited from monthly support countrywide. This program will continue in 2013. Mr. Speaker, there is no more effective a way to assist the vulnerable than to help them secure the independence of gainful employment. For this reason, in addition to the various training programs conducted by government, we also seek to match persons seeking employment with potential employers seeking staff to recruit. In this regard, over the course of 2012, some 2,912 new registrants were added to the Central Recruitment and Manpower Agency's system in order to be considered for employment. A total of 3,623 individuals were interviewed, and through the support of this agency, 2,945 unemployed persons successfully gained work placement. In 2013, a substantial effort will be made to further strengthen this agency to create an effective labor market clearinghouse with which job seekers can register their interest in finding employment, employers register their recruitment needs, and the agency perform a proactive matching service. Efforts will also be made to decentralize the services of the agency, especially by the use of technology. For this purpose, an amount of $52 million has been provided in the budget to strengthen this agency and also to promote its capacity to ensure equal opportunity for all in the labor market. Enhancing security and justice. Public safety and security. Mr. Speaker, government has embarked on a comprehensive program of reform to the security sector. Government sees this as a long-term process and has designed a strategy which articulates a holistic approach to citizen security and safety and public welfare. The strategy focuses on key areas dealing with developing and strengthening administrative competencies, improving professionalism, strengthening accountability and integrity, deepening interagency and interorganizational linkages for greater cohesiveness and impact, expanding on safe neighborhood pilots, and establishing houses of justice to allow for greater people participation and involvement in public safety and security issues. In 2012, $16.4 billion was expended for the continued development and modernization of the sector. In this regard, 5-year strategic plans were completed for the Ministry of Home Affairs, Police and Prisons, and now guide the priorities of these agencies. With a view to ensuring that the operational capacity of the joint services is continuously improved and to complement the efforts of modernization, $822.7 million was spent in 2012 on the acquisition and maintenance of essential security-related equipment. To support the operationalizing of the integrated crime information system and improve our capacity to collect and analyze crime statistics, 18 police stations in regions 4 and 6 were equipped with computers and connected to force headquarters. Crime information can now be compiled electronically on a daily basis and shared with force leadership, thus enhancing planning and use of resources. In addition, new fire stations at Diamond and Mahaica were completed to provide firefighting capabilities for the Upper East Bank and Upper East Coast Demerara areas. Construction continued on the Fire Service Training Facility at Leonora and on the Guyana Forensic Science Laboratory. Substantial emphasis was placed on training of joint services ranks, both locally and overseas. Mr. Speaker, 2013 will see the continuation of government's heightened focus on security. Specific interventions will be made to enhance citizen confidence in the law enforcement system. More police presence will be provided, and better trained professionals with greater attention to accountability will be the norm, particularly because this aspect of performance will be monitored closely to ensure standards are met. There will also be a more intense collaboration between and among the agencies of the joint services to ensure maintenance of security and stability. Further, the implementation of the 3 strategic plans will allow for more effective prioritization in the use of the sum of $17.5 billion allocated to the sector. Focus will be placed on enhancing physical infrastructure, providing air, land, and water transport and equipment for the sector to discharge its mandate effectively. With regards to the fight against drugs and piracy, the maritime sector will benefit from greater physical presence of maritime forces with the operationalizing of floating bases in regions 2 and 6. In support of further advancing the capabilities of the safety and security personnel, ranks of the police from the level of constable to assistant commissioner will benefit from mandatory overseas training, while fire service personnel will benefit from the new training school. Furthermore, the Guyana Forensic Laboratory will be completed and is expected to become operational in the latter part of the year. This new state-of-the-art laboratory will make a significant impact by providing sound scientific basis for investigations and expert testimony to support the adjudication of cases. Mr. Speaker, crime and security are a global concern, and Guyana continues to play a principal role internationally in fighting crime. Yes. Our bilateral and multilateral efforts are mutually beneficial as Guyana supports the global campaign against drugs, money laundering, corruption, terrorism, and the illegal arms trade. Our relationships with our bilateral and multilateral partners in the global campaign against crime and violence have provided conclusive evidence of how valuable our contributions are regarded. Justice. Mr. Speaker, as part of government's commitment to build an enabling environment for accelerated development in Guyana, significant focus continues to be placed on strengthening the effectiveness and efficiency of delivery of services in the justice sector. To this end, $2 billion was expended in 2012 by the sector, including on modernizing and upgrading both the physical and institutional aspects of the judicial system. In relation to physical infrastructure, during 2012, over $256 million was expended for the rehabilitation of magistrates' courts in Georgetown, Wim, Maibikuri, Sisters Village, and New Amsterdam, along with maintenance works at the Court of Appeal, the High Court, and the High Court registries in Georgetown and Berbice. The use of technology was introduced in the courtroom with the first instance of evidence being taken from a witness by video conference. On the institutional front, the capacity of the judiciary was enhanced by increasing the complement of judges. Efforts were directed towards the continued revision of the laws of Guyana up to 2010, the publication of the Guyana law reports for the period 1930 to 2007, and the upgrade of library collections. Further, a computerized management information system for case-related information was fully operationalized, linking the Georgetown and New Amsterdam High Court registries. This allows for more timely access to case status and case decisions. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, focus will be placed on consolidating improvements in the operations of the justice system. The criminal justice system will benefit from attention paid to coordination and collaboration among relevant agencies. More judges, better trained police prosecutors, increased capacity and expansion of the office of the DPP into the administrative regions, and better resourced magisterial districts all have the potential of significantly improving the functioning of the criminal justice system. Building on the gains already made, the sum of $2.1 billion has been allocated to the sector. With regards to physical infrastructure, construction works at the magistrates' courts in Wales, Letham, and Linden are expected to be completed during the first half of this year. The recently completed mediation center in New Amsterdam is expected to become fully operational before the end of the year. In addition, the family court will be brought into operation. Furthermore, the revision of the laws of Guyana up to 2010 will be completed. In addition, Mr. Speaker, on top of the over 8,000 backlogged cases that were cleared from the system last year, a further 1,000 cases are expected to be cleared. With a view to improving the general public's access to case information, the Supreme Court will also be launching a website during the second half of the year to include listings, status of cases, hearing dates, and completion dates for all cases pertaining to the bail, commercial, family, and constitutional courts and chambers applications. Foreign relations. Mr. Speaker, our government remains committed to the safeguarding of Guyana's sovereign and territorial integrity and the maintenance of strong relations with our neighbors. Areas of focus continue to be trade facilitation and investment, external trade negotiations and implementation, as well as capacity building and institutional strengthening. Pursuant to safeguarding our territorial priorities and following Guyana's submission in 2011 to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, an oral presentation was made in April 2012, and a subcommission constituted to consider the data and information provided by Guyana. We now await the outcome of those considerations. Also in 2012, there was sustained dialogue with our immediate neighbors, Brazil, Suriname, and Venezuela, as we sought to consolidate efforts to achieve well-defined programs of cooperation with them. We will continue to work with these countries to advance current initiatives and to identify additional areas for further strengthening of relations. Government will also continue to consolidate relations with countries with whom Guyana has had traditional ties, while fostering the development of new strategic alliances. Mr. Speaker, Guyana remained an ardent advocate of the merits of Caribbean integration and is actively involved in every aspect of the Caribbean integration enterprise. In 2012, the CSME project focused on deepening the requisite administrative reforms and institutional capacity building relating to practices, procedures, and standards to deliver the rights conferred under the revised treaty to community nationals within the CSME. In 2013, we will continue to give full support to CARICOM to restructure the Secretariat, consolidate the single market, in particular those provisions and procedures which relate to the free movement of people and transportation, as well as to the region's priority concerns of food and energy security and sustainable development. Guyana will advance at the national level with respect to the harmonization of the single market's regulatory framework, the installation of administrative reforms through implementation of national work plans, and the drafting of model regulations for the 5 CSME regimes. We will also pursue our engagements within the wider regional integration mechanisms. In particular, we will remain active participants in UNASUR and CELAC. Mr. Speaker, finally, we continue to take proactive steps to keep the Guyanese diaspora engaged. To this end, the Guyana Diaspora Project seeks to mobilize the valuable human resource that constitutes the diaspora by documenting skills, resources, and the return interests and plans of those willing to support the national development agenda. This will, in time, result in a more structured engagement with our overseas-based Guyanese community. Other institutional reforms, financial sector reform. Mr. Speaker, a strong and stable, well-regulated and well-managed financial system is critical to the economic well-being of our country. Our aim is to continue to ensure that the financial system is governed by an adequate regulatory framework and that it adheres to relevant standards to preserve the objectives of stability and strength while promoting universal access to financial services. To these ends, the commercial banking subsector continues to expand with growth in all key indicators, including, as previously reported, private sector credit. Coverage also improved with expansion in branch networks in recognition of the growth and vibrancy in new and emerging commercial centers. In 2012, new bank branches were opened in Charity and Monrepo, and new services introduced, including internet banking. Still on the subject of access, Mr. Speaker, a recent innovation by the private sector to introduce the facility of making payments using cellular telephones has the potential to improve access to financial services and reduce cash utilization in the economy. Such use of technology has the potential to bring financial services to persons, especially in unbanked and underbanked communities, including the hinterland. While this innovation and use of technology in the delivery of financial services is welcome, its regulatory implications would also need to be examined closely and any appropriate regulatory prerequisites put in place. Access to financial services, and in particular access to credit, will receive a significant fillip with the imminent licensing and establishment of a credit bureau in Guyana, work on which is considerably advanced. Mr. Speaker, in the insurance sector, progress continues to be made in resolving the domestic chapter of the CLICO debacle. At the end of last month, amounts totaling $4.4 billion were paid out to 8,634 policyholders, up to a maximum of $30 million per policyholder, as a result of which virtually all policyholders have now been paid in full. The liquidator intends to continue to garner additional resources through sale of company assets and legal action, including in relation to other companies in the CLICO group outside of Guyana. Work has also commenced on the drafting of a revised Insurance Act and a new Pensions Act to further strengthen the regulatory and supervisory framework governing this subsector. Furthermore, work will be advanced to review legislation governing credit unions with the aim of bringing them also within the supervisory perimeter of the Bank of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, to further strengthen and safeguard the integrity of our financial system, efforts will be heightened in 2013 to enhance institutional capabilities to implement the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Act, and to establish an adequate anti-money laundering architecture in keeping with applicable standards. A total of 9 supervisory authorities have been appointed to date in relation to casinos, cooperatives, charities, dealers in precious and semi-precious stones and metals, financial leasing, money transfer agencies, trust and company service providers, and insurance business. Reporting entities were sensitized on customer reporting requirements via circulars, and training sessions were conducted with customs officers at the CJIA and compliance officers of money transfer agencies and cambios. Importantly, in 2013, government will bring before this Honorable House proposed amendments to the AML-CFT Act to further strengthen that Act and bring it in line with current international requirements. Training and sensitization on reporting requirements will be done with the supervisory authorities, and their capacity to conduct audits and monitor compliance will be strengthened. In addition, regulations and guidelines will be developed for several categories of reporting entities. Improving the business environment. Mr. Speaker, government continues to view the private sector as the engine of economic growth. The steps taken by government thus far in creating an environment that is conducive to support growth and expansion in the business sector are reflected in the visible progress in several sectors of the economy, as well as in Guyana's ability to attract new investments. In advancing the efforts to enjoy a business-friendly environment, government has developed and will implement an ambitious action plan. This plan addresses 10 policy areas of the business environment, and over 60 actions have been identified covering areas such as starting a business, dealing with construction permits or licenses, getting electricity, registering property, accessing credit, protecting investors, paying taxes, trading across borders, enforcing contracts, and resolving insolvency. The National Competitiveness Council will spearhead the work to implement this action plan, which, when completed, is expected to constitute significant further improvement to Guyana's business environment. Improvements in tax administration have focused on ensuring reduced transaction time and cost for clients. The recent consolidation of several tax services in the new Cam Street location of the GRA removes the need for clients to travel across the city to access tax services, thereby reducing cost and time taken to do business with Guyana, with the GRA rather, and within Guyana. Further, the expansion and strengthening of integrated regional tax offices in Anna Regina, Bartica, New Amsterdam, Linden, Parika, and Corriverton has resulted in more services being easily accessible. Outreach and public relations programs will be intensified to ensure that all taxpayers are fully informed on an ongoing basis, and staff will be trained to deliver a client-friendly service. Mr. Speaker, we are currently undertaking a diagnostic study of the trade transaction